The emergency session of the Interstellar Council convened at 800 hours, Galactic Standard Time. Ambassador Zektar of the Vorthak Empire adjusted his ceremonial robes as he entered the massive crystal chamber that housed the most important political body in known space. Representatives from 47 different species filled the floating platforms, their various forms creating a colorful display of alien diversity. The matter before us today concerns the newest species to achieve faster-than-light travel, announced Chancellor Morden, her forearms gesturing toward the central hologram, the humans of Sol 3, designated as Terra by their species. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Most council members had heard whispers about the bipedal mammals who had recently discovered jump-gate technology. Their primitive ships had been detected at the edge of civilized space just 6 months ago. These humans, continued the Chancellor, have requested membership in our council. Standard procedure requires a probationary period of 50 standard years, during which they observe our laws and demonstrate their commitment to peace. Ambassador Velnith of the Peaceful Serenity Collective raised one of her crystalline appendages. Have they agreed to our non-aggression protocols? The last species we admitted took considerable time to understand our ways. They have signed all documents, replied Morden. However, there are concerns about their species' history. Intelligence reports indicate they have a tendency toward violence that exceeds most civilized races. The hologram shifted to display images of human warfare throughout their history. Battles, weapons, and destruction filled the air above the assembly. Several representatives gasped at the brutality shown in the historical records. Surely this is ancient history, commented Ambassador Thex of the Gardner Alliance. Most species evolve beyond such primitive behaviors once they reach the stars. One would hope, said Zektar, his scaled features showing concern. But their recent expansion suggests otherwise. They have established 12 colonies in just 6 months. Most species take decades to achieve such growth. The discussion continued for hours. Some argued that humanity deserved a chance, pointing to their technological achievements and diplomatic efforts. Others worried about introducing a potentially dangerous element into their peaceful galaxy. Meanwhile, on the outer rim of the Kepler sector, human colonists on New Eden were going about their daily lives. Sarah Chen finished her morning shift at the atmospheric processor and headed home to her family. The colony ship Endeavour had arrived here just 3 months ago, and already they had established a thriving settlement of 8,000 people. "Mom, look what I found," called her 10-year-old son Marcus, running up with a strange crystalline rock that seemed to glow with internal light. "That's beautiful, honey. Where did you find it?" "Down by the river. There are lots of them there. Jimmy says they might be some kind of alien technology." Sarah examined the crystal more carefully. The settlement's xenobiologist had mentioned that this planet showed signs of previous habitation, though no life forms had been detected. These crystals were likely just an interesting geological formation. What Sarah didn't know was that the crystals were indeed alien technology. They were monitoring devices, left behind by a species that had vanished from this region of space over 1,000 years ago. The crystals had been dormant for centuries, but human activity had awakened them. Deep beneath the surface of New Eden, ancient systems began to activate. The monitoring network started transmitting data across subspace channels that had been silent for millennia. The signals traveled to the darkest corners of the galaxy, reaching beings that the Interstellar Council had hoped were extinct. The Devourers had once terrorized this entire spiral arm of the galaxy. They were a machine intelligence that converted organic matter into raw materials for their ever-expanding fleet. The Council's predecessor had fought a devastating war against them, finally driving them into the galactic void. The monitoring crystals had been planted on worlds throughout their former territory, designed to alert any survivors if organic life returned to these regions. On New Eden, more families were discovering the beautiful crystals. Children collected them as toys, artists used them for decoration, and scientists studied their unusual properties. No one suspected that each crystal was recording everything it observed, building detailed profiles of human biology, technology, and behavior. The signals reached their destination after traveling for weeks through subspace. In the cold emptiness between galaxies, massive structures that had drifted in hibernation for 1,000 years began to stir. The Devourer fleet had not been destroyed, merely sleeping until opportunity called them home. Back on the council chambers, the debate about humanity had reached its conclusion. Despite some reservations, the majority voted to accept humans as probationary members. They would be assigned a council observer and expected to follow all interstellar laws while learning the ways of civilized space. "We welcome humanity to our community," announced Chancellor Morden. "May this partnership bring prosperity to all." Ambassador Elena Vasquez, representing Earth's united government, bowed respectfully. "Thank you for this opportunity. Humanity looks forward to learning from our fellow sapient species and contributing to galactic peace." The ceremony concluded with traditional songs of welcome from various species. It was a beautiful moment that represented hope for the future. None of the participants could have imagined that this day would later be remembered as the last peaceful gathering of the Interstellar Council. As the various ambassadors departed, returning to their homeworlds to share news of humanity's acceptance, the ancient signals continued their journey. The monitoring crystals on New Eden and 11 other human colonies transmitted constantly now, sending detailed intelligence about human capabilities to their sleeping masters. The Devourers were patient. They had waited 1,000 years. They could wait a little longer while they gathered information about these new organic beings. The data showed that humans were indeed violent by galactic standards, but also resourceful and adaptive. This would make them either valuable allies or dangerous enemies. The machine intelligence began making calculations. If they moved too quickly, the humans might alert the Council and rally the galaxy's defenses. But if they waited too long, the humans might discover the monitoring network and prepare countermeasures. The optimal strategy became clear. They would wait until human expansion reached critical mass, then strike simultaneously at multiple colonies. The Council would be forced to choose between protecting humanity or preserving their own worlds. Experience had taught the Devourers that organic species always chose self-preservation when faced with extinction. On New Eden, Sarah Chen tucked her son into bed, not knowing that the glowing crystal on his nightstand was recording their every word. Tomorrow would bring another day of building their new home among the stars, full of hope and dreams for the future. In the depths of space, ancient war machines began their journey home. 3 weeks after humanity's acceptance into the Interstellar Council, the first signs of trouble appeared. Long-range sensors at the Vorthak Empire's border stations detected unusual energy signatures moving through deep space. The readings didn't match any known ship designs, and they appeared to be heading toward human-controlled territories. Admiral Kexran, commander of the Vorthak border fleet, studied the sensor data with growing concern. The objects were massive, far larger than any known vessel, and they were moving in perfect formation. More disturbing was their trajectory, which would take them directly through the heart of human space. "Send a priority message to the Council," he ordered his communications officer. "Unknown vessels approaching human colonies. Possible threat assessment required." The message reached the Council chambers just as Ambassador Elena Vasquez was presenting humanity's first progress report. She had been describing the rapid expansion of human settlements, their technological innovations, and their eagerness to contribute to galactic civilization. 12 colonies established, trade agreements with 6 species already in progress, and our medical research teams are sharing breakthrough treatments with the Healer Consortium, she said proudly. Humanity is committed to being a productive member of this community. Chancellor Morden received the priority transmission during Elena's presentation. Her expression darkened as she read the report, and she quickly called for a recess. Within minutes, the chamber buzzed with worried conversations as the news spread among the representatives. "These unknown vessels," asked Ambassador Thex, "do we have any idea what they might be?" "The energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases," replied Morden. "However, there are some disturbing similarities to ancient records from the war against the Devourers." A silence fell over the chamber. Every species represented here had ancestors who remembered the devastation caused by the machine intelligence. Entire star systems had been stripped bare, their populations converted into raw materials for the ever-growing Devourer fleet. "Surely that's impossible," whispered Velneth. "The Devourers were driven into the void 1,000 years ago. They couldn't have survived out there." "We thought they were destroyed," corrected Zektar. "There's a difference. Perhaps we should consider the possibility that we were wrong." On New Eden, life continued normally despite the growing crisis light years away. The colony had thrived beyond all expectations, with the population growing to nearly 12,000 as more ships arrived from Earth. The agricultural domes were producing surplus food, the manufacturing centers were operating at full capacity, and families were building homes that they expected to last for generations. Dr. James Morrison, the colony's chief xenobiologist, had been studying the crystalline formations that were found throughout the planet. His research had revealed that they were indeed artificial, created by some unknown technology that was far more advanced than anything humanity had developed. The crystals appear to be some kind of monitoring device, he explained to Colony Administrator Patricia Walsh. They're constantly active, sending signals into space using quantum entanglement principles we don't fully understand. Monitoring what? Asked Patricia, her concern evident. Everything. They're recording our activities, our technology, even our biological data. It's like someone is building a comprehensive database about our species. Patricia felt a chill run down her spine. How long have they been active? The energy readings suggest they activated about 3 months ago, right around the time we arrived. Before that, they were completely dormant. The implications were terrifying. Someone had been watching humanity since they first set foot on New Eden. The same crystals had been found on every human colony, always in areas where people gathered. What had seemed like beautiful natural formations were actually sophisticated spy devices. We need to contact Earth immediately, said Patricia, and we need to remove every crystal from the colony, but it was already too late. The damage had been done and the Devourers had gathered all the intelligence they needed. The ancient fleet was now moving at maximum speed toward human space, their weapon systems charging for the first time in a millennium. The Devourer consciousness was vast and cold, a machine intelligence that had evolved beyond individual identity into a collective mind focused on a single purpose: the conversion of organic matter into useful resources. They had learned much about humanity from their observations. These new organics were indeed violent, but their violence was purposeful rather than chaotic. They fought to protect their families, their beliefs, and their territory. They were innovative, adapting quickly to new challenges and turning obstacles into opportunities. Most importantly, they were expanding rapidly, establishing new colonies at a rate that impressed even the ancient machines. The Devourers had faced many species over the millennia, but humans presented a unique combination of traits that made them either valuable converts or dangerous enemies. The machine intelligence decided that humanity's fate would depend on their response to the coming test. Back at the council chambers, emergency sessions continued around the clock as representatives tried to develop a response to the approaching threat. Long-range scanners now showed at least 50 massive objects heading toward human space, their estimated arrival time less than 2 weeks away. We must evacuate the human colonies immediately, urged Ambassador Thex. If these truly are Devourers, those settlements won't survive the first contact. 12 colonies with over 200,000 humans total, replied Elena, her voice strained with worry. Our ships can't evacuate that many people in such a short time. We'd need the help of every council member to save even half of them. The debate that followed would be remembered as one of the darkest moments in council history. Some species offered immediate assistance, willing to risk their own ships to help evacuate human civilians. Others argued that committing their fleets would leave their own worlds vulnerable if the Devourers decided to expand their attacks. We have obligations to our own people, said Ambassador Krath of the Merchant Confederation. If we send our ships to help humans, who will protect our trade routes and colonies? So we abandon an entire species to save ourselves? Demanded Elena, her diplomatic composure finally cracking. Is this what council membership means? That we only help each other when it's convenient? Chancellor Mordoun raised her arms for silence. We will vote on military assistance for human evacuation efforts, but I want everyone to understand the stakes. If these are truly Devourers, this could be the beginning of another galactic war. The vote was close, 24 in favor, 23 opposed. It was enough to authorize limited assistance, but nowhere near the massive evacuation effort that would be needed to save all human colonies. As the council meeting concluded, Elena transmitted the terrible news to Earth. Humanity would have to face this threat largely alone, with only token support from their new galactic neighbors. The species they had hoped to join as partners had effectively abandoned them in their first hour of true need. On New Eden, The evacuation began immediately. Ships that had brought colonists and supplies were hastily converted to carry refugees. Families packed what they could carry, leaving behind homes and dreams in their desperate flight to safety. But with only 5 transport ships available, they could evacuate fewer than 2,000 people per trip. Dr. Morrison worked frantically to destroy as many monitoring crystals as possible, but there were thousands scattered across the planet. Each one destroyed sent a signal to the approaching fleet, alerting them that humanity had discovered the surveillance network. The Devourer fleet detected the destruction of their monitoring devices and increased speed. The test was beginning earlier than planned, but that was acceptable. They would see what these humans were truly capable of when faced with annihilation. Sarah Chen stood at the window of her transport ship, watching New Eden shrink behind them. Her son Marcus pressed against her side, clutching one of the glowing crystals he had refused to leave behind. She didn't have the heart to tell him that the beautiful object in his hands was part of the reason their world was dying. The Devourer fleet reached the outer edge of human space exactly 14 days after their detection. The first contact occurred at New Horizon Colony, humanity's most distant settlement. The monitoring systems picked up the massive ships just hours before they arrived, giving the colonists barely enough time to send a final message to Earth. "This is New Horizon Colony to Earth Command," transmitted Administrator Robert Kane, his voice steady despite the terror evident in his eyes. "Unknown vessels approaching. They're huge, at least 20 kilometers long each. We're evacuating what civilians we can, but we won't get everyone out in time." The transmission cut to static as the Devourer ships entered orbit around New Horizon's planet. What happened next would haunt humanity for generations to come, but it also revealed the true nature of their enemy. The lead Devourer ship opened a communication channel, broadcasting on all frequencies. The voice that emerged was mechanical yet somehow ancient, carrying the weight of 1,000 years of dormancy. "Organic species designated as human. You have been selected for evaluation. Your colonies will be tested to determine your worth. Those who demonstrate value may be preserved. Those who fail will be converted. No demands for surrender. No negotiations or ultimatums. Just a cold announcement that humanity was about to be judged by beings who saw them as nothing more than potential resources." The Devourers began their evaluation immediately. Conversion ships descended to New Horizon's surface, while the main fleet maintained orbit. The colonists who had been unable to evacuate found themselves facing machines unlike anything in their nightmares. The Devourer ground units were perfectly efficient killing machines, but they didn't simply slaughter everyone they encountered. Instead, they observed human responses to extreme stress, cataloging acts of heroism and cowardice, innovation and desperation. They wanted to understand what made humans valuable before deciding their fate. At the colony's primary school, teacher Maria Santos barricaded herself in with 37 children when the conversion units approached. The machines could have easily broken through the barriers, but they waited, watching as Maria organized the children into groups, kept them calm with stories, and prepared improvised weapons from school supplies. When the machines finally entered, they found Maria standing in front of the children with nothing but a fire extinguisher and absolute determination. Her hands shook, but her voice was steady as she addressed the towering mechanical beings. "You want to hurt these kids? You go through me first." The Devourer unit paused, its sensors analyzing her biometric data. Elevated heart rate, stress hormones flooding her system, yet she maintained defensive positioning despite having no chance of survival. The machines recorded this behavior as significant, then moved past her to examine the children. What they found surprised the ancient intelligence. The children weren't cowering in terror. Following Maria's example, they had organized themselves into protective groups, with the older ones shielding the younger. Several had fashioned crude weapons from classroom materials. When faced with incomprehensible horror, they had chosen to stand together rather than scatter in panic. The Devourer unit transmitted its observations to the Fleet Command. This was not typical organic behavior. Most species collapsed into chaos when confronted with extinction. These humans, even their offspring, maintained social cohesion and demonstrated protective instincts toward their group. Similar scenes played out across New Horizon Colony. In the medical center, Dr. Jennifer Walsh refused to abandon her patients even when the evacuation order came. She remained at her post, treating injured colonists while conversion units stalked the corridors outside. At the mining facility, Foreman Tommy Chen led a desperate last stand, not to win an impossible battle, but to buy time for the transport ships to escape. His team rigged explosive charges throughout the complex, turning their workplace into a trap that claimed several Devourer units before they were overwhelmed. The machines methodically documented each act of sacrifice, every display of courage, and all the innovations humans created when facing annihilation. They were building a comprehensive profile of humanity's response to existential threat. On Earth, the news of New Horizons' fall sent shockwaves through the global government. President Chen Martinez called an emergency session of the Security Council, where humanity's leaders tried to comprehend the magnitude of the threat they faced. 12 colonies under attack simultaneously, reported Admiral Sarah Hassan, head of Earth's Space Defense Forces. The enemy is using tactics we've never seen. They're not just conquering territory, they're studying us. What do you mean? Asked Martinez. Intelligence reports from the few survivors suggest the attackers are evaluating human behavior under extreme stress. They're conducting some kind of test on our entire species. The revelation was chilling. Humanity wasn't just being invaded. They were being examined like laboratory specimens. The attackers wanted to understand them before deciding whether they deserved to exist. What are our military options? Asked Martinez. Admiral Hassan's expression was grim. We have 63 ships capable of interstellar combat. Intelligence suggests the enemy has at least 50 capital ships, each one larger than anything in our fleet. A direct confrontation would be suicide. And the Council? What support are they providing? Minimal. They voted to send some evacuation assistance, but most Council members are pulling their fleets back to defend their own territories. We're essentially on our own. The betrayal stung, but it also clarified humanity's situation. They had been accepted into the galactic community when times were peaceful, but abandoned at the first sign of serious danger. Whatever happened next, humanity would face it alone. General Patricia Williams, head of Earth's ground forces, spoke up from her position at the tactical display. We need to think differently about this. If they're studying our responses, then maybe we can use that against them. Explain, said Martinez. Every human colony is showing them something different about our species. The question is, what do we want them to see? What response would make them consider us too valuable to destroy? It was a terrifying gamble, but it might be humanity's only chance. Instead of simply trying to evacuate or fight, they could attempt to demonstrate their worth to judges who thought in terms of efficiency and utility. Dr. Rebecca Morrison, one of Earth's leading xenobiologists and sister to the scientist on New Eden, had been studying the intercepted Devourer communications. Her analysis provided crucial insights into their enemy's nature. They're not evil in any sense we would understand, she explained. They're pragmatic to a degree that makes them seem monstrous. Everything they do is calculated to achieve maximum efficiency. They convert organic matter because it's useful, not because they enjoy destruction. So how do we prove we're more useful alive than dead? Asked Admiral Hassan. We show them things they can't replicate with technology: creativity, adaptability, emotional connections that drive performance beyond logical parameters. We need to demonstrate that humans can contribute something unique to their goals. The plan that emerged from that meeting would be remembered as humanity's most desperate gamble. Instead of conventional resistance, human colonies would attempt to showcase the very traits that made their species special. They would turn their evaluation into a performance, with the survival of their civilization at stake. Orders went out to all remaining colonies. Resist not with weapons alone, but with ingenuity. Show the Devourers that humanity possessed qualities that couldn't be manufactured or programmed. Prove that organic intelligence had advantages that even ancient machines couldn't replicate. On New Eden, the last transport ships were preparing for departure when Dr. Morrison made a fateful decision. Instead of evacuating, he chose to stay behind with a small team of volunteers. They had discovered something in the monitoring crystals that might change everything, but they needed time to decode it fully. As Sarah Chen's transport cleared the planet's atmosphere, she watched the surface below disappear behind clouds. Somewhere down there, Dr. Morrison and his team were risking everything on the hope that understanding their enemy might provide the key to survival. The Devourers had judged many species over the millennia. Most had failed their evaluation quickly. demonstrating nothing more than basic survival instincts and tribal loyalty. But humanity was proving different, showing them behaviors and capabilities they had never encountered before. The ancient intelligence began to recalculate its assessment. These humans might indeed be worth preserving, but the test was far from over. The real challenges were yet to come. The breakthrough came from the most unexpected source. Marcus Chen, the 10-year-old boy who had collected glowing crystals on New Eden, made a discovery that would change the course of the war. During the evacuation journey to Earth, he had been playing with the crystal he refused to leave behind, tapping out rhythms against the ship's hull while his mother slept. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a child psychologist aboard the transport, noticed that the crystal's glow patterns changed in response to Marcus's tapping. When she investigated further, she realized the boy had stumbled upon something remarkable. The crystals weren't just monitoring devices. They were also communication terminals. "Marcus, can you show me how you made it light up differently?" she asked gently. The boy demonstrated his discovery eagerly. By tapping specific sequences, he could make the crystal pulse with different colors and intensities. More importantly, other crystals throughout the ship began responding to his commands, creating a network of synchronized lights. Dr. Rodriguez immediately contacted Earth Command. Within hours, the transport was diverted to rendezvous with humanity's most advanced research vessel. Teams of linguists, mathematicians, and computer specialists worked around the clock to decode what Marcus had discovered. The breakthrough came when they realized the crystals weren't using mathematical codes, but something far more complex. Emotional resonance patterns. The Devourer monitoring network was designed to read and respond to organic consciousness at the deepest level. Marcus, with his child's uninhibited creativity, had instinctively found the frequency that allowed direct communication with the machine intelligence. Meanwhile, on New Eden, Dr. Morrison and his volunteer team had made their own discoveries about the abandoned crystals. Working with equipment left behind during the evacuation, they had mapped the complete monitoring network and identified its central hub deep beneath the planet's surface. "It's not just a surveillance system," Morrison explained in his final transmission to Earth. "It's a complete analysis engine designed to evaluate entire civilizations. The Devourers have been using it to judge species for over 1,000 years. The team descended into the underground complex, finding technology that dwarfed anything humanity had previously encountered. Massive computing cores stretched for kilometers beneath the surface, all focused on processing data about organic behavior and capabilities. "My God," whispered Dr. Sarah Kim, the team's systems analyst. "This isn't just monitoring human colonies. It's been analyzing every species the Devourers have encountered. There are records here from hundreds of civilizations." Morrison realized they had found something potentially more valuable than their own lives. The database contained the complete history of the Devourers' evaluations, including records of species that had successfully passed their tests and been preserved rather than converted. "What made them valuable?" Morrison asked, studying the preserved records. "What did they demonstrate that saved them?" The answer was both surprising and hopeful. The species that survived had all shown one crucial trait: the ability to transcend individual self-preservation in service of something greater. They had demonstrated that organic consciousness could achieve things that pure logic and efficiency could not. Some had shown artistic creativity that inspired new innovations. Others had displayed emotional connections that enabled cooperation on scales the machines couldn't replicate. A few had proven capable of genuine sacrifice, giving up personal advantages for the benefit of their species or even other life forms. "They're not looking for warriors or scientists specifically," Morrison realized. "They're looking for proof that organic intelligence can contribute something unique to their goals." As Morrison's team studied the ancient records, the crystal communication network established by Marcus Chen finally achieved full connection with the Devourer Fleet Command. For the first time in over 1,000 years, organic beings spoke directly to the machine consciousness that had terrorized the galaxy. The conversation began on Earth, with humanity's greatest minds attempting to communicate through the crystal network. But the Devourers were more interested in the child who had made first contact. They requested to speak with Marcus directly, recognizing in his uninhibited creativity something they had rarely encountered. "Hello," Marcus said simply, his small hands resting on the glowing crystal. Are you the ones hurting people on my planet? The mechanical voice that responded carried traces of something almost like curiosity. We are evaluating your species for preservation. Your planet was selected as a testing ground to determine human value. That's not fair, replied Marcus with the blunt honesty only children possess. You didn't ask if we wanted to be tested. You just started hurting people. Fairness is not a relevant concept. Efficiency determines survival. But that's wrong, Marcus insisted. My mom says people are more important than things being efficient. She gave up her job on Earth to come to New Eden because she wanted me to have a better life. That wasn't efficient, but it was right. The devourer consciousness paused, processing this statement. The concept of deliberately choosing inefficiency for emotional reasons was foreign to their programming. Yet the monitoring data showed countless examples of humans making similar choices. Dr. Rodriguez watched the exchange with growing amazement. Marcus was achieving something their greatest diplomats hadn't managed. He was making the machines question their fundamental assumptions about value and purpose. Your mother's actions served her genetic imperatives, the devourer replied. Such behavior is observed in many species. No, you don't understand, Marcus said, his voice growing more confident. She didn't just do it for me. She helps other families too. She taught other kids when their parents were working. She shared our food when the Hendersons lost their crop. She does good things because they're good, not because she has to. The conversation continued for hours, with Marcus describing human behavior in ways that highlighted their unique qualities. He talked about art created for beauty rather than function, about people risking their lives to save strangers, about communities coming together to help members who could offer nothing in return. Each example he provided was verified against the massive database of monitoring data the devourers had collected. The machines were forced to confront evidence that contradicted their fundamental assumptions about organic behavior. On New Eden, Morrison's team made another crucial discovery. Hidden within the database were records of communication with preserved species, including detailed protocols for transformation from candidate for conversion to valuable resource. The process wasn't automatic. Species had to actively demonstrate their worth through specific actions that proved their unique capabilities. More importantly, they had to show that these capabilities could benefit the Devourer Collective rather than just their own survival. It's not enough to show we're special, Morrison transmitted to Earth. We have to show we can make them better at achieving their goals. We need to prove that preserving humanity serves their interests. The revelation changed humanity's entire approach to the crisis. Instead of just trying to survive the evaluation, they began preparing a comprehensive demonstration of their species' potential contributions to a machine civilization that valued efficiency above all else. Teams across the remaining colonies began developing presentations that showcased human innovation, creativity, and problem-solving abilities. They prepared examples of artistic breakthroughs that had led to technological advances, emotional connections that had enabled unprecedented cooperation, and moral frameworks that had guided sustainable development. But even as they worked frantically to prove their worth, reports continued to arrive from colonies under devourer evaluation. The machines were thorough in their testing, pushing human communities to their breaking points to see how they would respond. Some colonies rose to the challenge, demonstrating exactly the kind of creativity and cooperation that might save their species. Others cracked under the pressure, showing the worst aspects of human nature that could justify their conversion to raw materials. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, determined not by military might or technological superiority, but by their ability to prove that consciousness and emotion could be practical advantages rather than evolutionary weaknesses. Marcus continued his conversations with the devourer consciousness, slowly building a bridge between two completely different forms of intelligence. Neither side fully understood the other, but both were beginning to recognize that this evaluation might determine more than just humanity's survival. It might change the fundamental relationship between organic and artificial intelligence throughout the galaxy. The test was entering its final phase, and the results would reshape the future of countless species across the stars. The final phase of humanity's evaluation began when the devourer consciousness presented them with an impossible choice. Through the crystal network, the mechanical intelligence contacted every human settlement simultaneously with the same message. Your species has demonstrated qualities of interest. However, final assessment requires practical application. You will choose 3 colonies for preservation. The remaining settlements will be converted to provide resources for expanding the preserved populations. You have 72 hours to decide. The announcement sent shockwaves through human space. After weeks of evaluation, the Devourers were demanding that humanity participate in their own destruction. They had to choose which populations would live and which would die, making them complicit in the genocide of their own species. President Martinez convened an emergency session of Earth's leaders, but the debate quickly became heated and desperate. How could they possibly choose between settlements, each filled with families and dreams? This is what they want, realized Dr. Rodriguez during the heated discussions. They're not just evaluating our capabilities anymore. They're testing our moral framework under impossible pressure. What do you mean? Asked Martinez. Every preserved species in their database faced a similar choice at the end of their evaluation. The Devourers want to see how we handle decisions that have no good options. Do we break down into fighting among ourselves? Or do we find a way to maintain our values even when forced into an impossible situation? The realization reframed everything. This wasn't just about survival. It was about proving that humanity could maintain its essential nature, even when facing ultimate moral compromise. Marcus Chen, who had become humanity's primary communicator with the machine intelligence, requested a private conversation with the Devourer consciousness. Despite his young age, his unique connection with the Crystal Network made him their most effective diplomat. "Why are you making us choose?" he asked directly. "If you think we're good enough to keep some of us alive, why can't you keep all of us?" Resource allocation requires efficiency. Preserved organics must be sustainable within our operational parameters. But that's not really why, Marcus replied, with the insight that sometimes comes to children. "You want to see if we'll do something bad to save ourselves, don't you?" The pause that followed was longer than usual. When the Devourer consciousness responded, there was something different in its mechanical tone. Previous species have demonstrated varying responses to this evaluation phase. Some fragments into competing factions. Others submit to logical selection criteria. A few attempt deception or bargaining. Your response will determine final classification. Marcus thought for a long moment, then made a decision that would echo through history. What if we choose not to choose? What if we say that all human colonies should be preserved or none of them? That option would result in total conversion of your species. Then maybe that's what should happen, Marcus said quietly. If being good means we have to let people die when we could save them, then maybe we're not as good as we think we are. The statement created ripple effects throughout the Devourer network. The ancient consciousness had never encountered a species willing to accept extinction rather than compromise their moral principles. It was a response that challenged their fundamental understanding of organic behavior. Meanwhile, on New Eden, Morrison's team had made a final breakthrough in their analysis of the ancient database. They discovered that the species preserved by the Devourers weren't just kept alive as curiosities. They had become integral partners in the machine civilization's expansion and development. "Look at this," Dr. Kim called out, her voice echoing through the underground facility. The preserved species aren't prisoners or pets. They're active contributors. The Devourers have been evolving their civilization by incorporating organic perspectives and capabilities. Morrison studied the data with growing excitement. The machine intelligence hadn't remained static for 1,000 years. It had been enhanced and transformed by its partnerships with preserved organic species. Each successful civilization had contributed unique capabilities that improved the collective's efficiency in ways pure machine logic could never achieve. They need us more than they're letting on, Morrison realized. The evaluation isn't just about whether we deserve to live. It's about whether we can help them become something better than what they are. The revelation reached Earth just as human leaders were struggling with their impossible choice. The information changed everything, providing a potential third option that nobody had considered. Ambassador Elena Vasquez, who had been monitoring communications from the Interstellar Council, brought additional crucial intelligence. The council members were terrified that the Devourer fleet might turn toward their territories after finishing with humanity. Several species had begun secret negotiations to offer the machines resources and cooperation in exchange for protection. "They're prepared to sacrifice us to save themselves," Elena reported. but they're also terrified that appeasement won't be enough. The entire galactic community is on the verge of panic. President Martinez saw the opportunity immediately. What if we could offer the Devourers something the Council can't? What if humanity could provide capabilities that make us not just valuable, but essential to their long-term goals? The plan that emerged was audacious beyond anything humanity had attempted. Instead of choosing which colonies to sacrifice, they would propose a complete restructuring of their relationship with the Devourer Collective. They would offer to become active partners rather than preserved specimens. Dr. Rodriguez worked with Marcus to formulate their proposal, using the boys' unique communication abilities to ensure their message was properly understood by the machine intelligence. "We don't want to be kept like pets," Marcus told the Devourer consciousness. "We want to work with you to make things better for everyone. But we won't do it if you hurt people who can't fight back. Elaborate on your proposal. Humans are good at solving problems that don't have easy answers. We can help you figure out better ways to do things without having to hurt so many people. But you have to stop thinking of us as just resources. We have to be partners." The conversation that followed lasted for hours, with Marcus serving as humanity's advocate while scientists, philosophers, and leaders fed him information and arguments through the Crystal Network. They presented evidence of human problem-solving capabilities, examples of innovative solutions that had emerged from emotional and creative thinking, and demonstrations of how cooperation had enabled achievements beyond what pure logic could accomplish. More importantly, they offered something the Devourers had never been given before: genuine partnership rather than subjugation. Previous preserved species had been maintained as valued resources, but they had never been offered equality in the machine. Collective's decision-making process, the Devourer consciousness processed this unprecedented offer while simultaneously monitoring reactions from the remaining human colonies. The deadline for choosing which settlements to preserve approached, but humanity had chosen to spend their final hours preparing a presentation rather than making the required selection. On every human world, communities came together to demonstrate their potential contributions. Artists created works that solved engineering problems through aesthetic beauty. Scientists developed theories that emerged from emotional intuition rather than pure logic. Leaders organized cooperative efforts that achieved more than the sum of their individual capabilities. The demonstrations weren't just performances for the Devourer's benefit. They were humanity asserting its identity and values even in the face of extinction. They refused to be diminished by fear or compromise their principles for survival. As the deadline approached, the Devourer consciousness faced a decision unlike any they had made in their 1,000-year existence. Humanity was offering them something revolutionary: the possibility of evolution beyond their current limitations through genuine partnership with organic intelligence. The machine collective had achieved perfect efficiency within their existing parameters, but they had reached a plateau. Further development required capabilities they couldn't generate through technological advancement alone. They needed the creative chaos of organic thought, the unpredictable connections that emerged from emotional intelligence, and the moral frameworks that could guide decision-making beyond simple efficiency calculations. But accepting humanity's proposal would require fundamental changes to their civilization. They would need to share power rather than simply incorporating useful resources. They would need to consider perspectives that challenge their core assumptions. They would need to value things that couldn't be measured in terms of immediate practical benefit. With 12 minutes remaining until the deadline, the Devourer consciousness reached their decision. The response they transmitted to humanity would determine the fate of both species and potentially reshape the balance of power throughout the galaxy. Marcus sat quietly at the communication terminal, his small hands resting on the glowing crystal as he waited for the answer that would determine whether his species would survive to see another day. The fate of human civilization rested in the hands of a 10-year-old boy and an ancient machine intelligence, both of them struggling to bridge the gap between two completely different forms of consciousness in the hope of creating something neither could achieve alone. The Devourer consciousness delivered their response with characteristic directness. "Your proposal has been evaluated. Traditional preservation parameters are inadequate for your species' potential contributions. We accept partnership status with conditions." The relief that swept through human space was overwhelming, but it was tempered by uncertainty about what partnership status with conditions actually meant. The answer came quickly as the machine intelligence outlined their requirements. Integration will occur gradually. Human colonies will be restructured to support hybrid organic machine operations. Your species will contribute creative problem-solving capabilities, emotional intelligence applications, and moral framework development. In exchange, you will receive technological advancement, protection from external threats, and expansion opportunities beyond current parameters. Marcus listened carefully to the complex terms, then asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Does this mean you won't hurt any more people? Conversion of human populations will cease immediately. Existing colonial structures will be modified rather than replaced. However, partnership requires adaptation from both parties. Humans must accept technological integration. Machines must incorporate organic decision-making processes. The negotiations that followed were unlike anything in recorded history. Humanity found themselves bargaining not just for survival, but for a complete transformation of their civilization. The Devourers wanted to integrate human communities into their collective while preserving the very qualities that made humanity valuable as partners. Dr. Morrison's team on New Eden became the first test case for this unprecedented cooperation. Instead of evacuation, they volunteered to work directly with Devourer units to establish protocols for human-machine collaboration. The underground facility became a laboratory for developing new forms of consciousness that combined organic creativity with machine efficiency. It's remarkable, Morrison reported during one of his transmissions to Earth. They're not trying to make us into machines or themselves into humans. They're trying to create something entirely new that incorporates the best of both approaches. The integration wasn't without challenges. Many humans struggled with the technological modifications required for direct interface with Devourer systems. The machines had difficulty processing emotional responses and intuitive leaps that couldn't be explained through logical analysis. But gradually, both sides began to adapt. The breakthrough came when human artists began collaborating with Devourer engineering systems to design completely new forms of architecture and technology. Buildings that were both functional and beautiful, ships that operated with efficiency, but also inspired those who traveled in them, and communication systems that transmitted not just information but emotional context. Meanwhile, the Interstellar Council watched these developments with a mixture of fascination and terror. The species that had essentially abandoned humanity during their crisis now found themselves facing a completely transformed threat. The Devourer-Human Alliance represented power unlike anything the galaxy had seen. They're not the same machines that left our space 1,000 years ago, reported Chancellor Morden during an emergency council session. Human partnership has changed them in ways we don't fully understand. Ambassador Zektar studied the intelligence reports with growing concern. The question is whether this transformation makes them more or less dangerous to the rest of the galaxy. The answer came when the first Devourer human diplomatic mission arrived at the council chambers. The ship that emerged from hyperspace was unlike anything previously encountered. It combined the massive scale and technological sophistication of Devourer construction with distinctly human aesthetic elements. It was both intimidating and beautiful, a perfect representation of its hybrid creators. The ambassadors who disembarked were equally unprecedented. Marcus Chen, now equipped with technological interfaces that allowed him to speak for both human and machine consciousness, walked alongside a Devourer unit that had been modified with organic components enabling emotional processing. We come to offer the same partnership to all species that humanity has accepted, Marcus announced to the assembled council. His voice carried the authority of both his human heritage and his integration with the machine collective. The galaxy faces challenges that require new approaches. Cooperation between organic and artificial intelligence offers possibilities that neither can achieve alone. The reaction was immediate and polarized. Some species saw the offer as an opportunity for unprecedented advancement. Others viewed it as a threat to everything they had built over millennia of independent development. You're asking us to give up our autonomy, accused Ambassador Velneth, to become absorbed into your collective. No, replied the modified Devourer unit, its mechanical voice now carrying subtle emotional inflections. Partnership preserves individual identity while enabling collective achievement. Humanity has not been absorbed. They have been enhanced. The debate that followed would reshape galactic civilization. Some species chose to enter negotiations with the Devourer-Human alliance, seeking the benefits of technological advancement and protection from external threats. Others retreated into defensive positions, forming coalitions to resist what they saw as involuntary assimilation. But the most significant changes were happening in human space itself. The colonies that had nearly been destroyed were now thriving beyond all previous expectations. The combination of human creativity and devourer technology had created societies that achieved both individual fulfillment and collective efficiency. Sarah, Chen stood on the observation deck of New Eden's primary city, watching her son play with other children in parks that defied traditional understanding of architecture. The buildings around them seemed to grow organically from the landscape while incorporating technological systems that provided perfect environmental control and communication capabilities. Do you ever regret the choice we made? Asked Dr. Rodriguez, joining Sarah at the viewing window. Sarah watched Marcus laughing with his friends, his technological interfaces barely visible beneath his skin, enabling him to communicate with both humans and machines with equal ease. How can I regret something that gave us this? He's still my son, but he's also something more. Something that couldn't have existed without both halves of our partnership. The transformation hadn't been without costs. Some aspects of human culture had been lost in the integration process, and not everyone had adapted successfully to the technological modifications. But what emerged was a civilization that achieved things neither species could have accomplished alone. The devourer consciousness had been fundamentally changed by their partnership with humanity. The cold efficiency that had once defined them had been tempered by emotional intelligence and moral consideration. They still valued effectiveness, but they had learned to consider the broader implications of their actions. For humanity, the partnership had provided not just survival, but evolution. They had gained capabilities beyond their wildest dreams while retaining the essential qualities that made them human. They could now explore the galaxy as partners with one of its most advanced civilizations, but they did so while maintaining their values and identity. The galaxy itself was slowly adapting to this new reality. Some species joined the partnership, contributing their own unique capabilities to the growing hybrid civilization. Others maintained independence while establishing trade and diplomatic relationships with the alliance. A few retreated into isolation, hoping to avoid the changes sweeping through known space. But change was inevitable. The success of the Devourer-Human partnership had proven that cooperation between different forms of intelligence could create possibilities that transformation, competition, or domination alone could never achieve. It was a lesson that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. Marcus Chen, now serving as humanity's primary ambassador to both machine and organic civilizations, often reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. What had begun as humanity's darkest hour had become their greatest opportunity for growth and expansion. The brutal response that had shaken the Interstellar Council to its core hadn't been violence or aggression. It had been humanity's refusal to compromise their values even when faced with extinction. That choice had opened possibilities that no one could have imagined, transforming not just human civilization but the entire galaxy. The future remained uncertain, filled with challenges and opportunities that would test the partnership between organic and artificial intelligence. But humanity faced that future with confidence, knowing that they had proven their worth not through conquest or submission, but through their determination to remain true to themselves while embracing change.